Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to make a book from scratch, and that starts out with paper making. So I got this kit from Bogie, and it comes with some shop towels, which are very important to separate the pages. It also comes with some thick paper pieces. These are actually what you make the pulp out of, so you soak them in water and then you blend them finely in a blender to make the pulp that you then sieve out. And yeah, this kit, I've used it before and I tried to film it and I didn't really get a good angle or anything to make it visible, so I wanted to try this again. And it also comes with some colorful pieces of paper. These are just standard thin A4 crafting paper that you can mix in. I have some kaolin, which is essentially a clay mixture to like bond the pulp a bit more. And then we have some gelatin. This is not cooking gelatin, this is a bit different, this is for sizing for later. And then we have some instructions, and you need 50 grams cellulose, and it says 8 tablespoons of kaolin. So essentially it's like a clay base that you mix in, and you know, it helps like bond the fibers and make the paper a bit stronger. So it's really nice that they incorporated that. I saw a lot of people just use pulp, but I appreciate that they want to make it as easy as possible for us to actually make good paper. So I measured out the pulp I need in weight, and then I also added a little bit of yellow and a tiny bit of red to make like a nice warm orange. And then I let it soak for 24 hours and blended it. And after, it was just a matter of filling it up with water to the amount they recommend, and then spreading the fibers around actively, and while they're still floating, you essentially go in with the sieve. The first part always takes me a couple try to make sure that the fibers are floating nicely in the water, not too much, not too little, so I can actually get a nice layer. And once I have that, I can actually like let the excess water dribble off and then carefully remove the upper frame. I did fix the edge here a little bit, and I'm like trying to let as much water escape as I can. And you can see my second leaf, and then all I'm doing is like carefully tipping it over onto the shop towels. And it's really important here that I let as much water drip off as I possibly can, because if I don't, the stuff will just essentially like fall apart while I'm tipping this. And then I have all the excess water off with this sponge, and there's a lot of excess water. You can get a lot out of this, and then you just let it sit for a little while. And then you carefully like shake it a little bit and the paper should just fall off. And then I make sure that I have a piece of shop towel on both sides at all times so it doesn't stick to anything. And I also have a towel underneath just to make sure that there's no excess water running on my table or anything, and to absorb things, because again, there's a lot of water. Even if you dab a lot off, there will be a lot of water in this process. And of course we need to get all of it out to let the paper dry. So what I'm doing once I run out of shop towels is I fold the towel that I used as base over, take another towel and lay them flat on the ground, and I just stomp on it for a while to make sure that the towels absorb as much water possible. And then I carefully lay out the sheets just to dry on the shop towels. And then once they're dry, which takes about a day or two, it's time for sizing. And this is actually what we use the gelatin for. Sizing is the process of essentially sealing the paper, and it uses a different kind of gelatin, mostly than food grade gelatin, to like essentially make the fibers bond better and be less absorbent, because if you would write or paint or anything onto like unsized paper, it just completely feathers out in most cases and you cannot really use it. Maybe except with ballpoint pen, but even pencil doesn't like to stick on it too much. You can see here I have a lot of paper. Some of them are a bit thin on some sides. Those were where I didn't mix the pulp that well. sandy, and then some were like really, really thin. Those were in the end where I tried to get enough paper out to like not have too many leftovers. Again, you can keep the pulp and like re-soak it and stuff, but I just wanted to make as much paper as possible at once. And the other pieces are pretty thick though. And then you can see here's actually the paper from my first try, and the like orangey color actually comes from flowers here. I didn't add any colored paper in my first try, I just blended in flowers. And that actually turned out super well, and it has a fun texture, and I wanted to incorporate that in my book too. Now after my first sizing, which was like with the recommended amount from the booklet, I wanted to test everything, so wanting to start out with some pencil, and it hardly shows up, and this is a very soft pencil. Ballpoint pen shows up, but I can feel the fibers are like sticking, and it's not a nice experience to write on. I also wanted to try the extremes, so a ballpoint pen is the easiest, but a like fountain pen with the ink spreading is the hardest essentially, which that's like the true test. And then watercolor is also a good test because that's like my main painting medium, and I didn't know yet what I wanted to use this book for, so I wanted to try and make it essentially watercolor fast. And as you can see, fountain pen is already spreading terribly, and here I'm using very little water and a lot of pigment, and you can see it still only soaks up the water and doesn't really pick up any of the pigment, and these are very, very pigmented watercolors. And I'm picking up a ton of pigment on my brush just to give it like a chance to try and lay down anything, and I tried, it feathered, it didn't really even deposit the pigments nicely, so I guess that is a fail here. But that's okay, I kind of expected that since this was my first time trying sizing. I hoped that the ratios would be okay in the booklet, but yeah. So I actually had to resize the paper, and I tried another suggested ratio and that didn't work, so I'm not even gonna mention it. I have to try to find a good ratio that I can tell you guys that will work, but the other one made it slightly better. It was like slightly higher, not good enough still by far, so I need like way higher ratios. So if any of you have experience with paper making and know a good ratio of gelatin to water to size the paper with, please let me know in the comments down below. I would highly appreciate it. I tried to ask some people that I also saw paper making, and half of them didn't even know what sizing was, so that didn't help too much. But I'm still experimenting with this since this is only my second, technically third time since we made some paper in school a while back, but we didn't do any of the post-processing, so I have no idea what we did, and we also used newspaper. I know that depending on the base also it absorbs less or more. With the pulp here, definitely absorbs a lot. But yeah, you can see my second test already is way better. It does feather less, and I can actually get a little bit of a watercolor painting down. And again, I'm not using much water, and you cannot really blend on this paper since it essentially just completely soaks through, but it definitely holds the pigment way better, and with a little bit of dabbing I managed to get this cute little tree going, which, definitely not my technique. And you can see while I'm putting the pigment on the paper moves independently because it's just so soaked that it swelled so much that it needed a long time to dry also after this again. But it definitely was a start to my adventure here in making paper for my art. Pencil did not deposit almost at all still, which is okay. I didn't expect it to with the texture the paper had. I mean, it has texture, but yeah, I guess it also depends on the sizing here. And then I also wanted to try some marker, and both of them alcohol markers and normal water-based markers faded out so much you could hardly get any definition at all, so that's sadly no. But for now, I'm quite happy with the sizing I did have on there, since I could at least write in there with ballpoint pen. So that's what I'm gonna use it for, a notebook, and as my first, paper making test, like true test. I would say it was actually pretty successful to even get that going smoothly. And you can still do a lot with ballpoint pen. But now it was time to actually make the book, and for that I need to fold my sheets of paper and lay them in each other, which basically makes these signatures. So I'm trying to use like a max of 3 sheets, or else it would get too thick and it wouldn't lay evenly. And I'm also trimming a little bit of the edges just to make them fit nicely. I'm gonna trim a little bit more later. And I don't really have like many supplies for paper making. I'm using just the basics here, but like I have made a lot of books before, like small books with very, very simple supplies, and as long as you try and keep your sewing even and you have something to weigh everything down, it usually isn't that hard. I had some trouble marking out my distances at first, so it took a couple tries. I'm just using some like marker here to get like the holes marked out essentially. But then it was time for sewing. Also, I'm using some of my flower paper here as like my outside edges. I think they have a name, I don't know what it is though, but essentially the like paper that will be glued inside of the cover and that will hold everything in place. So I marked out where I need my holes for the sewing, and then I punched everything with my needle tool before sewing. I forgot what this stitch was called, but it's very simple. You essentially like loop your like second signature around the thread of the first signature and then sew everything very evenly, and it creates like a fun little like staircase of sewing that like holds everything together, and it usually works pretty well. You can like there's a ton of different sewing methods for signatures and things like that, so you can just look up which style you prefer. I really like this style since it's very simple and effective. Also, the thread I'm using is a strengthened multi-ply thread. It's essentially one that you can also use for like fixing socks and things like that, so it is a bit more sturdy, and you can definitely wax your thread to make it last longer. I didn't need that with this one since it's a very smooth thread, so it should hopefully hold quite a while. But yeah, here you can see how I've sewed everything together, and I did go in again with my scissors to carefully trim some of the edges, because there were some pages that had a lot of excess and it would make it really hard to like glue it and evenly like into my covers. So all I did here was trim. Now I would suggest, which I totally forgot before you actually sew things together, to press your signatures first. But I'm pressing it later after I sewn it together. It made my stitches be a tiny bit looser than I would like, but it was still totally fine. It still worked out nicely. So what I'm doing here is I'm just using 2 old like placemats that are very sturdy, and I'm taping them together as tightly as I can with my sewed signatures in place, and then I'm cutting some linen, and this is going to be just to protect the spine. You don't necessarily need to glue anything to the spine. I just like it for some extra bond and to protect my sewing a little bit more. So all I'm using here is just some PVA glue and the linen fiber. Just something, I found like some fiber that is thin enough to like let the glue soak in really works the best. So thin cotton or linen, in this case I just used some scrap linen from a different project. And then after that's dried, while it was like still taped together and pressed, I could like take it out of the press and just, you know, prepare my covers. I also laid some books on top, which I didn't show in the video, but I weighted it down like as much as I can. I saw some people use like bricks that are covered in paper to weigh their signatures down to make them nice and flat, and then there of course are book presses, which are like thick pieces of wood that you like twist together with some metal rods and some wind screws to like actually get enough pressure. But I found like just using some weight on top with like books and stuff works really nicely for the beginning, and since I'm not making many books, it was more than enough. After I cut my covers, I made sure that they're a little bit larger than my pages, just to protect the edges of my pages. I used some more linen. This is just red linen, and I glued them on. Also, I made sure that I glued on my like spine cover fabric like completely to the sides, because beforehand when you clamp it, or I clamped it, I could only glue like the back, and then I just made sure to like go around the front and the back and glue everything down nicely. And then I just cut out my cardboard. I measured roughly by like holding my already bound signatures like onto the cardboard, and then I just cut it out. This is like a very heavy duty, heavyweight cardboard here, and I just glued it onto the linen again, same glue, just PVA, and then I folded the sides over and glued those down as well. Let that dry, and then I could finally glue in my little pages. And I'm starting up with one side and some baking paper to make sure that the sides doesn't actually, like the pages don't stick together. And this works super well. So by placing one side, I can place that evenly and make sure that it sits in the middle, and then I can just fold over the other side. And I'm leaving the spine here because I want to make sure that I can fold this book open nice and flat. And you also saw that when I glued down the like cardboard for the spine, I left some spacing, and that is just so I can actually fold it open a bit more flat. And after weighing it down with some weights on top to make sure the glue is evenly like sticking, I can finally reveal the book. And here it is. With the type of sewing I chose, it will open up very nice and flat, and as long as you keep the signatures thin enough for them to not bulk out, you should actually get a book that you can open pretty nicely. Now, I did glue it not perfectly straight to the spine, so the first few pages don't quite open flat, but that is also because I should have really like pressed them before sewing. But again, it's okay, my paper was a bit uneven anyways, and it still opens pretty far, like just the first few pages don't open fully flat. But yeah, I'm super happy with how this book turned out. The pages look super nice, I love the texture, I love the feel of them. Again, they don't quite work with watercolor or markers, but just with ballpoint pen, but that, you know, needs a bit more practice. And again, like the more books I bind, I guess the better I also get with getting them more even and with laying flat. But considering this was also my first time binding a book with handmade paper, I'd say it is 100% successful. And practice makes perfect, as I always say, so, you know, in the future, if I try this again, I will definitely get better and better. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you think of my little project here, and tell me if you've ever made paper before and what out of. I know that a lot of people actually recycle materials to make paper, which I really love the idea of. I obviously use the kit here with the pulp, but I also really love the idea of using old printer paper that you have left over, or newspapers, things like that. Because, you know, making paper out of paper but making it personalized is so much fun in my opinion. But yeah, and again, if you have any idea on like sizing ratios, please let me know. And as always, I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye.